Hello and welcome to a new episode of Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. I'm very excited about my guest today. This is a man who I met on Twitter, where I meet a lot of great people. It turns out you can meet great people on Twitter. He is a medical doctor. He is a singer-songwriter. He's a bit of everything. But the reason that I came into contact with him and I met him is he had this tweet recently that went viral, and I realized that we probably had a lot in common. His name is Dr. Joel Brown, and he also now writes for Wrong Speak publication, which is Adam Coleman's platform, which is awesome. Please welcome Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I have to say, the intro video music was top notch. Awesome.
My husband did that music.
It's
So I'm
it's
gonna let him know you said that. Thank you very much.
mm,
Dr. Brown, I'm gonna call you Joel. Is that okay?
yes, please do.
Okay. Joel, I've as I said to you before we started, I'm very excited to speak with you. I just had a good feeling about you,
Yeah.
and I feel like we probably have a lot to talk about or a lot of epiphanies that we've had that are
Mm,
similar. But I wanna start off for anybody who's not familiar with you yet. I just
mm,
wanna put up this, one tweet of yours that got a lot of attention,
yeah.
and maybe you can tell me a little bit about it afterwards and, like, what's happened to you since. So,
Mm,
this is when I saw you.
mm,
You said, "I'm Black," in quotes,
mm,
"intelligent, university educated, well-read, well-spoken, under 40, a medical doctor, and I don't have my preferred pronouns in my Twitter bio, nor do I believe that, quote, white heteronormative patriarchy, end quote, is the greatest threat to human civilization."
mm.
So, what happened after you posted this?
Right. So, I posted that on Twitter. As you can tell, and your audience might be able to tell, I'm not from America. So these ideas have spread around the world. It has felt, I think, this notion that we are in the middle of the greatest war against heteronormative patriarchy and white supremacy has been has saturated the culture around the world, and having myself go through, having had gone through definitely a season where I felt I was very much caught up in that sort of way of framing the conflict and the issues in the world, and then coming to a very slow but painful, rude awakening from that. The purpose of the tweet really was to make what might seem to just be a statement of fact, um, that perhaps might, to many who read it and think, well, that seems a bit of an oxymoron. This is someone who's technically um, younger in the kind of age group that where this ideology is almost ingrained as this is the way to view the world. This is sort of normal. This is the attitude to have. And actually, I felt I had no idea that it would have resonated with so many people. It literally took off. And it's worth noting that prior to this tweet, I think I had, perhaps 1,000 followers. As you mentioned before, I'm a medical doctor. I was pretty much using Twitter just to, see what's kind of going on in the medical space on there. The med, I think it's hashtag med Twitter or something like that, where mostly physicians are talking about the mundanities of our work and challenges that we face. And I had no real interest in really diving into the politics per se, of our day. But I think that Twitter, that tweet rather, just kind of it's
Well,
like the
let
beginning and the end of a sort of a way of me using Twitter.
well, let's back up. I suppose I should ask you before I ask about what happened after that tweet blew up,
Mm,
I should ask you, um, about your, did you have a waking up moment? Did you have kind of a red pill moment? Some people call it red pilling.
Yeah.
I know for me, in the moment, it was a long kind of process, but did
Yeah.
you do something like that?
So yeah, I think a moment wouldn't be a fair way of describing what happened to me either. There were a number of significant um, events, experiences, realizations. So just to provide some context, which I think will help your audience as well to kind of gauge where I'm from. So I was born in Jamaica in the 80s to fairly conservative, um, Christian parents. You know, did my former schooling there. And my mom, who happened to be British herself, she was born in England before she had relocated to Jamaica when she was in her teens. Um, she and our young family um, relocated to the United Kingdom. So I was like 15, starting out in a quite a different world. So my worldview, certainly there was a bit of a culture shock to kind of get accustomed to just a different set of social kind of priorities in some sense, and of course my worldview as it relates to the Christian kind of foundation, or the lens through which I view the world, it started to be challenged by this kind of very much pluralistic society, different ways of kind of viewing what's wrong and right, and so I think there was a slow sort of I guess kind of erosion of some of the kind of the confidence I had about, oh yeah, of course I figure the world out, so we
Yeah.
all kind of sometimes think, you get to 16, 17 years, you're like, yeah, I know what's going on. And then university was an experience, going to medical school and meeting new people. But strangely enough, because I think that's often a place where people find their formative faith gets completely obliterated, if not at least certainly challenged. It
For
might,
me, yes.
yeah, yeah, I get it. Quite a few of my friends, that was their story. Universities just sort of went a bit wild and kind of put that religion behind them. Mine somehow survived that, and and then it wasn't until kind of later on in life, really finishing medical school, getting into the world of working as a junior doctor, and got married soon after qualifying medical school. First kid on the way, and I kind of went through in that season a sense of trying to make sense of some of the stuff I was seeing in society. So there was a sense in which, okay, so I left Jamaica, a predominantly Black majority country. There was never really any sense that anything was out of reach for me. I could, be whatever I wanted to be, pursue whatever career I wanted to pursue. I was aware of poverty, and there's certainly class issues in Jamaica, but race as a barrier was not really something that we had to deal with. And as I said, that's not to say racism didn't exist in Jamaica. Certainly, colorism was something that you could be aware could be, certain people might find it difficult to get into certain jobs if they were too dark skinned, and there was some of that in the culture. But I think coming to the UK, there was much more of an awareness of okay, I'm Black and most people around me are white, and I need to be aware of what being Black means in a socio-political sense, not just, okay, this is my skin means anything else, really, because it just didn't have that kind of meaning. So I think that there was this sort of gradual indoctrination, is probably a word I could use to describe what I think happened, the sense in which I became very hyper aware of my race should explain the way I interact with people, or maybe some of my negative experiences that I had in the culture. So leading to your question about kind of like how things evolve, because there's so much I could kind of
Yeah.
share. Just to fast forward, having then found this point in my journey where I would say that, just being a junior doctor, getting married, I started to develop a frustration with the world. I started to see myself more and more as a victim. I started, despite successes that I had, just whatever challenges came my way, I just found myself, okay, thinking I'm Black. Racism is this force that is holding me back and other people who look like me. And so got more and more pulled into that frame of viewing the world. So a lot of the kind of the leftist, there was a strong appeal to get kind of sucked into that framing as the best way to not just explain the world, but to also empower me to fight what I felt was holding the world back. So a lot of my views then, including my faith, I started to see Christianity as just the kind of manifestation of European kind of hegemony and control over religious diversity, because I was like, okay, people who didn't what before Christianity, of course, there's people had lots of different religions or spiritual ways of being in the world, and so I just found myself deepening into this like, I use the term like not in a way to disparage it, but it felt, looking back, like as if there was this kind of cultic obsession of
Yes.
wanting to fight against the powers that be in the world that are oppressing the rest of us, especially those of Black origin. So that was kind of
I'm
like,
gonna interrupt your story
yeah,
for one
go for it.
second. So, because this is like I knew there would be similarities.
Mm,
I was raised Southern Baptist, but had a lot of reasons as a child to mistrust authority
mm,
and to see the hypocrisy in
yeah.
some people around me, people of faith. Um, and so it was university for me. I did have a falling away. It was earlier than it was for you. It did happen at
Mhm,
university, and but one thing you said that just it totally stuck with me is that I slowly, you said, start to see yourself as a victim.
mhm,
I had, up until, like, I went to a great college. I went to a science and math focused high school. I
mm,
never had any of those messages telling me women can't be scientists or women can't do this or women aren't smart. I just
mhm,
didn't pick that up. But
mhm,
when I got to university, I started taking women's studies, I started taking critical race theory and stuff, and I started to see myself more as a victim, and I started to see, you look back at the past and you pull out these, you start to see it everywhere. This ideology tells you to see it everywhere. And so over time, I started to, it was the same sort of similar thing. I started to see myself more as a member of an oppressed class, that there were other oppressed classes I was learning about, just like women are oppressed. Now you learn about Black people and gay people and fat
mhm,
people. And I don't think I even realized it was becoming, for me, I do view it now as cult-like and like
mhm,
a religion. But would
mhm.
you say it became a belief system for you?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, thank you for sharing that because it resonates that it's not just your own experience where you're looking back and going, like, you were introduced to a set of ideas that were very appealing, that
Mm,
had explanatory power. I remember reading about Thomas Sowell talking about his own experience and how how delightfully elegant some of these ideas can feel when you look at the world, you look at the brokenness, you look at some of the disparities, and you kind of go, yeah, this has a lot of explanatory resonance in some sense, even if the data doesn't always pan out when you start looking a little bit more deeply, or as he says, the facts don't always um, kind of correlate. But for me, definitely, because at the time where my religious worldview shattered, I went. It's like as if I woke up. I was like, prior to that, I was involved in serving in a church, preaching at times, worship leading, because music and creativity was like my main expression in the church and the way that I supported the church. And then just I actually did an apologetics event because I was quite really interested in sharing the gospel in the streets, explaining the why faith was relevant. So I was very committed. But then there was this sense in which I was like, but what if all of this is because this religious ideology was kind of forced upon my ancestors, and I believe it with such rigor and passion just because I've inherited it. And what if it's not true? And what if it's especially harmful for me to hold on to these ideas because my subjugated ancestors were forced out of their own original ideas? And so there was a sense in which I felt like I had to disabuse myself of this whole ideology and this whole system, because it's part of this oppressive imperialistic framework. And so the when you asked about did the leftist ideologies that I felt I was introduced to become like a religious or a set of beliefs, and I think definitely because there was a vacuum that was created from me removing that religious those religious ideas that I held so dear.
I want to pick back up with your story, but quickly go down this side route for a second. Do you think that's purposeful now when you look back? Do you think that that's, I guess maybe a better word is, it's necessary for this ideology to in some ways undermine Christianity?
Yeah, wow, great question. Necessary to undermine Christianity, and I would say yes. And as I'm listening, or as I'm trying to answer that question, because I think it's so profound, I'm almost trying to see which directions I would go to justify my yes. I would say, because ultimately, when I think about the story of the garden, and you have Adam and Eve, and they've sinned, and there is this moment between Adam and the serpent, where it's like Adam, I think it was prior to the sin, oh, they weren't meant to do this. And then the question of the serpent is, well, did God really say that? There was this questioning the notion of truth, because for me, there Christianity at its core, I think puts forward the idea that not only is truth a worthy cause, is something to defend and hold on to, that Jesus personifies that truth, the way, the truth, and the life, and that there is a requirement that we believe the truth of who he was, the evidence of his resurrection, and commit a life to him, and through that transaction and that acceptance and what he's done for us, there is this life that we can have, and the the atonement of our sins and all of that stuff. We know the message, but there's a sense in which a lot of these ideas, the way in which it views the world in this kind of very relativistic way, or the sense of moral truth is something that we can't know, we can't objectively hold to be, and what is therefore just and right is not necessarily now about it's much more this game between the different degrees of oppression, and it's, as I said, it's a very relative set of ideas. So I feel like, in a sense, for those ideas to flourish, it needs to undermine any set of ideas that opposes that says actually there is some way that we can that truth does exist, and it's not just this relative mush. I hope I tried to do that question justice.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, it has to. This belief system basically said that in some way there is no objective truth.
Yeah.
So I think it is necessary to attack. I have come to believe it's necessary. It's necessarily opposed to any competitive set of beliefs, especially if they say there is objective truth.
Yeah.
And you said
And
morality. Yeah.
yeah,
Also.
I was going to just say, and it even it's not, I guess, any system of belief that does affirm objective truth will be equally up for on the chopping block, as it were. And we're seeing the same with even there's a sense in which the scientific method and endeavor, which does hold to this notion that there can be objective truths or biological reality, and some of these things we're seeing this sense in which ideology that dismisses that can erode things that we all thought we could take for granted. I remember one time when the first time when I came across the notion of flat earthers, and this is not to, by the way, to make fun of anyone, but I remember when I came across that there were people who believed that the earth was flat, and I remember thinking, surely science has kind of settled that debate that that the earth is a spheroid or whatever, and but yet there are people who convincingly hold this notion, no, that and science can be kind of overturned at the whim of whatever they determine to be the truth. And I'm using this just as an example of when I remember thinking, gosh, we are at a very interesting place in our world today when it comes to the notion of what is truth in the first place. It seems like that's the kind of most fundamental question that we're all trying to grapple with.
What is truth? Which I think the answer is also, sometimes I think of God as truth. So it's like, what is God, and what are you worshiping?
Yeah.
You made me think of something, though, going all the way back like you did to the Adam and Eve story.
Yeah.
My pastor, Bradley Helgerson, he has a way of talking about that story that has helped me to also, I don't know if this was his intention in the way he talks about it, but I think about it now as sort of it's such a great illustration of my old ideology in some ways, because you've got Adam and Eve are in this garden full of yeses. Everything is a yes. There's one no. Don't eat of this tree, right? And you can kind of think about that with life. We are all born with certain, to borrow words from social justice people, we're all born with lots of privileges and a garden of privileges and yeses. We live like kings. We have indoor plumbing, Joel. I have I have such great respect for indoor plumbing now, having lived in a house that we're renovating where we did not have the plumbing for like 6 months. So now I'm like, oh, I can't believe we have such riches.
Yeah.
But we have a garden full of yeses. And then there are certain limitations in every person's life. Every person is privileged in some ways, and, to borrow their words, marginalized in other ways. I am not tall. I'm never going to be a basketball player. It's not fair, right? And I think kind of about that story now where the snake starts talking to Eve, and he's like, you have, instead of looking at all the positives, it's like, did he say you couldn't eat from this one tree? Like, what a tyrant. Like, what an oppressor, right? You're
Right.
so oppressed, Eve. And she buys it. And I kind of think about sometimes I think about my path of getting into this belief system and how enticing it is. You mentioned Thomas Sowell talking about you said explanatory nature of it, that there's something very enticing about that resentment that grows. Did you ever, in our conversation before we in our conversation online before we did this, you said you heard me talking about the Cain and Abel story as Jordan Peterson talks about it, and that really stuck with me when I heard him talking about it. He talked about Cain and Abel being an allegory for two different ways of being in the world. Cain being a way of like resentment, living with resentment and entitlement and arrogance, and Abel being, a way of living with gratitude and humility and thankfulness and gratitude. So would you say that that's, if you look at this belief system, does it look like a lot of it springs, how much of it springs from resentment, like that Cain way of living? And does it grow that resentment in your experience?
Oh, definitely. Oh, absolutely. And I love the way you speak about these issues, and even borrowing the phrases, like, because, there is legitimacy. We look at the world, we see disparity, we see what can look like, well, that's unfair. I mean, I've got two children, and their sense of justice, one child is unwell, and I'm taking care of that child more because they're unwell. I'm nursing them, I'm giving them medication, and the other child will then feel upset and feel that's not fair? You're giving them more attention than me. They don't quite understand. Yes, I'm giving them more attention than you, but there is a particular context. It doesn't mean I love you any less. But in a child's way of looking at the world, they're seeing that their sibling is getting more affection, attention, and we have, and they have in their minds that therefore this is unfair. And sometimes, to use that example, we're not always able to fully grasp why certain disparities exist, why some people are rich, why some people are poor, why some people are tall, why some people are short. We don't always have all the information to fully grasp that, but sometimes we can find ourselves, as I said, jealous or envious. And then there are other times where things have happened that shouldn't have happened,
Right.
and these are legitimate frustrations. But again, allowing that to breed resentment, for instance, if you think about the Cain and Abel story, I mean, Cain thought he brought his gift and Abel brought his, and for whatever reason in his mind he didn't like the fact that God was not pleased with his gift, and showed and was pleased with Abel's, and that resentment led him to commit a mortal sin, a horrible sin. And if we allow ourselves to go past, okay, I'm I'm not happy with, or I'm upset with this. I felt like perhaps there could have been a different outcome if he had gone to Abel or even gone to God and said, "Hey, this is upsetting for me. Could you explain this?" And I'm sure there would have been a different outcome, but resentment led him to make a sinful and harmful choice. I think much in the same way, some of the ideas, while they may be motivated originally from saying, okay, this disparity exists, this suffering exists, how can we remedy this, how can we fix this? But yet I feel like in many respects, for me and for others, the way that I saw it transforming my own life, I'll give you a really quick example.
Yeah.
I had white friends that I'd known for 20 years, and then when Black Lives Matter hit, after George Floyd, he died, and there was this sense in which outrage about racism was just everywhere. I felt like I was carrying this burden, that there were Black people being mauled in the streets in America. There was some, of course, there had been racial tensions in the UK, and there was a sense in which now white people everywhere who either weren't talking about racism were complicit because they just allowed their pride to get in the way of advocacy for these issues, and saying this is wrong, or they just didn't have an education about what happened in the past, and so therefore, if a white person misspoke about history or seemed, quoted Martin Luther King in a way that seemed too sanitized, didn't talk about the things that he might have had to say negatively about certain white people, whatever, it was enough to get angry and to feel like these white people aren't allying well enough. And it eroded friendships that I had, people
Wow.
that I had no other reason to not trust. I felt like they're not really for me in the way that they could or should be, because they aren't saying the right things about this particular issue, or they support this president when they should support this political party instead, etc.
Right.
And I think that resentment bore fruit in my life in ways that I'm still coming to terms with. I've reached out to a lot of these people because I know I haven't got to the point where you asked me right at the start, what was that transformation that happened, and I don't know if I've said a
I want to
lot.
get there. Well,
Yeah.
okay. So you had started to, well, you said like to pick up some of these ideas to see yourself more as a victim in society. And
Mhm.
I think you said something along the lines of being motivated to fight against
Yeah.
the oppressors.
Yeah.
So then what happened?
Yeah. I mean, it's I started to realize that I couldn't tell the difference between truly racist people and people who just happen to be white. It was like you're white, you have unpacked racial animosity or something within you that will either manifest as ignorance about um, things that are clearly racist in society, the pandemic of racism that's amongst us, or any kind of hostility or conflict between us. Racism is likely to be the explanation for that. And it's, if I'm honest, it compounded and left me in this space where I just felt really anxious about engaging in a world where there was mostly white people around me.
Mm.
Um, and despite the fact that I've never had any white person specifically come up to me and call me a racist name. And I'm not saying that's the only way that racism can manifest, but
Right.
I'm wanting to just be clear that I've had interactions. Don't get me wrong. I've had interactions where I felt unfairly treated by people who happen to be white, and at the time, the most sufficient explanation to me just felt, well, is it just they just didn't like me because I'm black? Rather than trying to get to what potentially might have been other reasons. So I think there was just a sense in which I just became more and more consumed, and it wasn't just race, the other issues that that you find lumped together with this, because this whole notion of intersectionality. And so I started to feel like, so the white heterosexual man is the problem, which is kind of going back to that original tweet, that you buy into this worldview that there is this hierarchy, the white heterosexual man who happens to be rich and able-bodied and is right at the top, and everybody else is in just sort of descending down this ladder of oppression. And
Intersectionality.
yeah,
Also at the very top, the white heterosexual man, he's also very you said able-bodied, good teeth,
yes,
good hair. You got to get
yeah,
all the I don't know, tall.
yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that there was just a point where, and I mean, I'd actually had there was a point where I had a coming back to faith that then got stalled because I was still working through, I still had a lot of the ideology saturating my worldview, and so I was struggling, for instance, with this notion that churches weren't fully affirming of the full left way of viewing things, whether it was as issues of sexuality, gender, and I was finding myself like struggling. I still wasn't sure whether or not I believed the Bible was truly the Word of God, and I had the sense of I want Jesus, but I'm not sure I want all of this kind of um, Christian way of framing what does it mean to live righteously before God, and I was just still in between there. But I remembered getting to a point where I just realized that I'm holding on to these ideas about how I frame the world, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, based on this particular lens that I inherited, that I bought completely into. And I found that it just wasn't, it just left me now starting to feel unsatisfied and I felt like it had destroyed so much in terms of friendships, and just my way of viewing the world was so jaded. And I think a point of what then was the real thing that maybe twisted and changed the trajectory completely really was just a fresh encounter with God, and really kind of understanding the scriptures in a way that I feel sufficiently explains the brokenness of our world and the disparity, and actually the heart to engage the world in a way to say, actually, yes, I do believe that there's real suffering. Racism does exist, and these things do exist, and I believe that as Christians and as people who care about wanting the world to be a better place, I feel like we should find constructive, helpful, honest, and ultimately truthful ways of dealing with problems that we face in our world. But the ideology that I got myself caught up in, and I think that others are still under the curse of. I think that unfortunately, while as I said, it may feel like it has some explanatory power in many ways, has, but I think it yields, it causes our hearts to become, as I said, to harbor resentment, to hold on to it, to falsely attribute blame and harm towards certain people because you feel you have the right, this is righteous indignation, so you have the right to do that in revenge.
So did those two things happen for you sort of overlapping side by side? You were being pulled back to your faith in God while also seeing some of the contradictions and the insufficiencies of the social justice belief system.
Yeah. So there exactly. So there was a simultaneous movement happening. So I realized. So there was a point where I defined myself. Excuse me. I defined myself as an atheist. I decided that Christianity just did not seem to fit in. It was just oppressive, and I needed to disabuse myself of that. So there was about a 3-year period where I thought at that time, well, if Christianity isn't true, religion is probably just like it isn't niche, the opiate of the masses, bought into this idea that people were just duped by religion, and it was I wasn't even interested in spirituality. I became very just disparaging about religion and spirituality. So I got very much caught up in the new atheist sort of. I'd read Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, quite a few of those, and was very much involved in some of the advocacy around reason, logic, and that being needing to be more at the fore of conversations to do with social and cultural issues and even moral issues. That's quite liked Sam Harris's ideas about trying to frame morality as a he talks about, I think he talks about, I can't remember the name of his book, but he tried to use kind of like to say that we don't need God to explain our moral impulses. So I was very much in that space, had this kind of rekindling, reawakening of faith, but I at that point felt I wanted to hold on to the worldview while still trying to do this reconnection with Jesus. And I was like, I want Jesus, but I want progressive Jesus. I want progressive. That was honestly what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And I couldn't reconcile the truths of scripture. And as I started to realize that actually, this is not gonna work ultimately, because I'm still trying to hold on to ideas rather than kind of like letting the truth of who God is and just shine a light on that.
Did you go through, as you started to question some of what I call the social justice ideology, people call it woke. There's all
Mhm.
I think, Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay for a while were calling it the identitarianism or identitarian, Marxism.
Mhm.
Um, but whatever you call it, as you started to question some of the belief system, did you go through a period of fear of letting people know things like you put in your tweet that you don't use
Mhm.
pronouns? Did you go through that period of like, I have to, like, what will people think of me if I don't affirm some of these beliefs?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny, like I tweeted about this recently where I said, look, one of the biggest barriers to authenticity is just the fear and feeling embarrassed about saying, hey, I was wrong, or I no longer hold to that view, or I see the error of my ways, especially if you were really loud about it. I was very loud about my
Yes.
view, shunned people. I made people feel like they were ignorant because they didn't agree with me, or they just, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
yeah.
Joel, wait. I wrote letters to my aunt about what a tool of the heteronormative cis patriarchy she was. The white supremacist culture. I produced a whole TV show about it. I was very, you know, even up until like during the election of Trump, I think if you go back that far, some of my posts were about, what a misogynist he was. And I mean, just all the time. Like, so you were
Yeah.
loud. Were you loud on social media
Loud
or
on
just
social
in your,
media. I was on,
in
but
your
I wasn't on. So I had a Twitter account going back a long time, but I didn't really use Twitter. My social media of choice was Facebook. So I was on Facebook day and night, just like, hey, so it's just so that you don't feel bad alone in terms of
okay.
my aunt that I actually was reconnected with at my grandmother's funeral back in 2019. I found out that my aunt there in the house, in the lead up to the funeral, voted for Trump, for his first his president. And oh my gosh, I ended up having this supercharged, really heated political discussion with her. I mean, we're all grieving, but it was one of those downtime days, and we were all just chatting about different things. But I look back and think to myself, I mean, I was just so upset by the fact that how dare you, like that's like I wasn't rude to her, but I felt like as if I was trying to hear her out for her rationale, her reasons. But I had so much arrogance and so much sense of,
Yeah.
like you're letting down your race by voting for this man, sort of thing. And whether one supports Trump or not isn't the issue here. It's the
Right.
way that my heart was towards people that
Yes.
agree with me, and one could argue, yes, people on the quote unquote extreme rights or left go through this where you feel like you demonize the other, but being able to kind of go, hey, you know what? That's how I felt then, and I'm really sorry about the way I
Yeah.
treated you. I'm sorry about and one of the things I did on Twitter again just before things quote unquote exploded. There was a Christian brother of mine called Sam. I've forgotten his surname. I'll remember it, but really, I reached out to him publicly on his Twitter feed and just said, "Hey, dude, I just want to apologize for the way that I responded to you in our interactions on Facebook, years ago when I was super caught up in this." And yeah, I mean, he's a Christian, much more of certainly a conservative voice. Samuel Say, that's his name. Samuel Say. People can check him out.
Oh, I love Samuel Say.
Yeah, I
Yes.
know Samuel. I know him.
Yes.
I years before, when I was much more in community and in faith and more on the conservative side, we had met a few times. I know him, but then I went through my phase of going into kind of the kind of radical left and getting sucked into that, and our friendship really just very much came to an end. So he was one of the friends that I lost and lashed out at on social media. So that public exchange on his Twitter
Wow.
page happened just before my account quote unquote exploded and went viral. But he shared that he replied to his friends to say, look, this is the reason I write. His blog is called Slow to Write, and
Slow to write.
yeah,
Yes. And he
so
has
I
one
know
of the
Samuel very
best.
well. So he's a testament to my story, and he knows what I went through, and he can he'll be able to
Oh,
confirm
that's
all this.
fantastic. I adore him. That's
Yeah.
what a small world. Okay,
Mm,
so you reached out to Samuel, you made an amends, which you
hmm.
said you think is one of the biggest problems with Twitter, maybe, or with one of the biggest impediments to people growing. I'm
Mm,
phrasing it my way
yeah, it's good.
is a lack of humility of being able to say I was wrong.
That's wrong.
Um, and you did that, and then you did this tweet, and then it went big.
Yeah.
And so what has happened to you since?
Well, I mean, like it's almost like over the a couple of weeks from that tweet going viral. I mean, it's been liked and reshared thousands of times. My profile has obviously ended up being seen by other leading voices within kind of libertarian slash conservative or independent space on Twitter, just people resonating with the clarity, the transparency, and just me just being real about my story and honest about where the ideology, left me. And one thing I want to make clear here, as I've tried to make clear on my page, I don't want to come across like I'm demonizing liberal people or people who
No,
even hold progressive views. I love people, and the love of Christ has helped to transform me in a way where I would, if a trans person who is gender neutral or binary came to me and had need, I would love them, I would embrace them, I would serve them in whatever way I could. If a Trump supporter came to me, there are times where, yeah, a few years ago, a Trump supporter or somebody with, who had the who had all the kind of relics of this is a person who is the opposite, I would just feel like, oh, I can't be seen or associated. Now it's like my heart is in a space where I genuinely feel like I can critique an ideology and embrace and love the people who have and hold that ideology. And so that's one thing that I want to really make clear. But it's been interesting. I've had a chance to meet lots of different people. People have obviously reached out to me to invite me to come and share my perspective and my story on their varying podcasts. Of course, this is one of them, and I absolutely had to take the offer from you. That was so kind of you. And yeah, I'm getting a chance to write and share my views. And I think the last time I checked, I think my account is probably around 27,000 ish followers. But I mean, again, I really did not anticipate that it would have gotten to this level, that my story would have resonated with so many people.
it's your authenticity, and it's
Yeah.
also just because that tweet specifically, like you said at the very beginning of this interview, you challenge a lot of the beliefs of the ideology just by saying, this is who I am, these are
Yeah.
my identity groups, and I don't believe XYZ, or I do believe this.
Mhm.
And so much of social justice, it claims to speak for people
Yeah.
based on what groups they're in. And so
Mm.
when you don't, it's like, oh, well, look at that guy. Like you mentioned, um, if speaking with a trans person or non-binary
Yeah.
person, my this interview is going to come out much later, but
Mhm.
later today, I have a live show,
Mhm.
and my guest host is a trans friend of mine, Sarah
Mhm.
Higdon, who
Mhm.
there are so many trans people actually out there who are like, or who people who have gender dysphoria, however you want
Mhm.
to phrase it, who are
Yeah.
like, this movement, this social justice ideology doesn't speak for me, and I actually think it's harmful.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
and because their voices get drowned out by the mainstream, by the people who are speaking
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing, just being a person in the world saying, this is what I think, is incredible. Can I
Yeah.
ask you, are there any, I went through a period of when I left social justice, I
Mhm.
had not realized how much I had caged my mind. And so afterwards, in my case, I did. I really stopped reading. I was just reading the approved cult literature. I was reading like the Robin DeAngelis of the world. Like I was just reading what was okay in my tribe. I loved Bell Hooks. I still love Bell Hooks and some
Mhm.
of what she has to say, but I wasn't reading anything outside of that. And afterwards, I had this need to know
Mhm.
more about history and there were people I had never even heard of, like Thomas Sowell, who I know you
Yeah.
mentioned. Are there
Yeah.
thinkers, are there books or things that you've just been finding yourself reading
Yeah.
voraciously, and
Oh,
who's
definitely.
inspiring you?
Yeah. Totally blind spots. It's like this is a phrase that comes to mind often these days, because I think we all have them, and the sooner we acknowledge them, and and I think when we talk about them, and I think they exist for wherever you are. So even those who consider themselves conservative, just be always aware of your potential blind spots. And for me, Thomas Sowell would be an example of someone that I'd only come across him a few times, when I was more certainly on the kind of radical fringes of the left, and it was videos that mocked him, and in fact
Mm,
he was being called a COON and all sorts of horrible names. So these are the types of black people that undermining, blacks, and that was so interestingly in this season of revisiting soul, after having such an awakening to some of the really powerful insights that he put forward, and his just overwhelmingly long, list of books he's written. Where, like, I mean, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I've already got my hands on a few. Shout out to Alan Wolin of the Thomas Sowell podcast that I recently been featured on, because he is a big part of my awakening to soul, and realizing how much of his ideas, again, not to say that all of his ideas are right, but it's just that he has a really profound grasp of economics and history, and a helpful balance. And I think what I would advocate for strongly is that people have a balanced reading of history. So it's fine, read, if you're going to read Marxism and read and be aware of that view, also read people like Sowell, read and come away with that sort of a view that is informed by different sort of schools of thought, and different, and I believe that form of education is worthwhile.
Yeah. So on your bio, the other thing you say on Twitter is that you're a Christian. You say it right up front.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, how have you experienced God? And if you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but I have some people, a deprogrammed audience is pretty diverse in terms of beliefs. There are many atheists who are very tolerant of me talking about God. and and also questioning, and people who are questioning, and people who are Christian. And I don't know, I'm just curious, like, in trying to talk about God with people who are not believers, or who are open to believing, but
Yeah.
there's that barrier where they're like, I want to believe, but I just
Mhm.
what is that experience like for you? I know it's different for other people. The experience
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah,
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
That's. I think it's a beautiful question. Thank you for the privilege to attempt to answer that, because I think any question like this isn't easy. And I think part of what I want to say to anyone who feels like their journey with relating to spirituality or understanding or engaging God has been difficult, whether that's because they feel like whether prayer just feels dry, or feels like, what on earth am I doing? I don't feel anything. Is just to say that this walk or this journey is not some kind of cookie cutter thing where we all have the same sort of experience, and it's all highs. It has, certainly for me, has been a journey. And I feel like I relate to God. I relate to the story of the prodigal son in the Bible, where you've got this man who had a relationship and went and kind of wanted that sort of independence, wanted to kind of go out into the world and figure out things for himself, and kind of pursue the success of life, and kind of found himself coming to the end of himself, really at rock bottom, in a place where he was really quite desperate, and had this recognition that actually I've pursued all this, but I've lost sight of the relationship with my father, and wanted to to come home to have that restored. But then in his own mind, he thought that certainly his father would not want to embrace him. He's embarrassed him. He's gotten lost and messed up. And in this imagery, you have him coming home, messed up, smelling of, covered in pig food and excrement, and he's coming home. And at that point in the road, he sees his father off, standing, running towards him with open arms. And that, he had probably no idea in his mind that his father was beckoning and hoping and wishing for him to come home. And so to me, my relationship with God has seen highs and lows, but I found complete acceptance of. I've found just it's like my ground zero. My relationship with God, regardless of what's going on in my life, whether I'm poor, whether I'm losing a car, or a child is ill, I have this sense that God loves me, unconditionally, truly, completely, and it's just the safest place in the world that I can be. I relate to God through just prayer. To me is not just a fancy set of phrases. I go, God, I'm struggling today. I just talk. I'm just real. It's the person. I believe that God hears us, and I can speak to Him, and just regular conversation. I express my worship as I play instruments. I sing. I might just start singing an old hymn, or a modern song, and I just express thanksgiving to God in that way, or just and sometimes I might write a song to express how much I appreciate God. And yeah, that's just a bit of how I connect, and it's so cool. And I mention it on my profile not because I'm trying to again come across as holier than thou. It's not at all at that. I just want people to know I'm at a stage in my life where I'm unashamed to say that God is truly my source and everything and I live for Him.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you think this is then this? A lot of people are saying we're in the middle of a culture war, which I think you'd probably agree.
Mhm.
Would you also describe it as a spiritual war?
Yeah, because it goes back to that notion where we started out, where we were saying that it feels like the essential question is, what is truth? Is there, why are we here? What is the purpose of our lives? Is there more than just the striving to get by? Is there any justice in the world? Whether there's this notion of cosmic justice, is there is there a way to right the wrongs of either the past or the future? Is there um, is there a reason to care
Mm,
for those who are suffering? And I feel these fundamental questions. We're searching, we're seeking, and we're all trying to find the answers of how can we come together as a species, look after the planet, look after each other, um, consider how to do that better through how we govern ourselves as a society, through policy, through legislation, etc. But I feel love. What does it mean to love each other, to love our neighbor, to love ourselves? But does love mean that all is permitted? That that we there is a sense in which we're trying to understand what is the common duty we have to each other,
mm,
and I think it's fundamentally a spiritual question, isn't
mm. I've recently had James Lindsay on my show with my pastor, James, who's an atheist. He also thinks it's a spiritual war, which
it?
I think is incredible. I think there's a lot of recognition happening that this is, even from people who don't believe in God or deity, who are like,
Mhm.
there's something an acknowledgement of evil, which sometimes opens the door to being able to see good. Once you can see evil in the world, I think it makes you more open to maybe the possibility that there's a God, that there's something good, but that there's a war happening, that something's going on that you don't understand. Welcome back, Joel. We had a technical difficulty because I asked Joel what 6 words, if you were limited, if you had a constraint, what 6 words would you say to your younger self? And
Mhm.
then Joel was like, goodbye, and left. I'm kidding. He had a technical problem.
Well, when you ask really hard questions like that, I'm sure several of your guests at that point go, okay, I think I'm gonna just
Spinning wheel. It
let
doesn't
that
have to
out.
be 6 words. I saw someone ask this on Twitter once, and it really made me think because of the constraint. I
Hmm.
think I really thought, wow, if I only had 6 words to get across something meaningful to the younger version of myself, what would they be? But it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be 6. What would you tell your younger self?
Do you know what? I think I would say this, and it could sound trite, but I trust me when I say I mean this in the most sincere and in the most um expansive way that one can think about it. But as it relates to my identity, I would want to affirm that my identity in Christ is enough. And the reason why I say that, so my identity in Christ is enough, is probably just over the things.
Yeah.
But because I think within that sense of identity, this notion that we all share a kind of a commonality, um, making up this kind of metaphysical body known as the body of Christ. And as I said, it's seen as this kind of like this very religious thing. And I think that even those who don't see themselves as Christians, just bear with me a moment as I kind of unpack this, but it's this notion that my, for instance, my skin color, or my whatever, who I might be attracted to, or whether my body is able-bodied, or have a disability, or any of these things, I don't need to fall into the trap of um of seeing them as definitive, or just, or certainly putting me in some kind of an identity box that I have to hold on to that for dear life.
Yes.
Um and I feel like that ultimately, that identity gap, wanting to make sense of who we are, and by the way, being a person in Christ doesn't mean that I can't embrace the fullness of I'm very proud of my skin complexion. And when I say that, I don't mean pride in the sense of, oh, this is something, I just like it, and it's okay to love yourself, all of your ins and outs. And I think that that's what I would probably say to myself, that yes, embrace all of who you are, but your identity in Christ is sufficient. I hope that makes sense to
It
you.
makes so much sense to me. I love that because so much of this identitarian social justice, Marxism,
Yeah,
whatever you want to call it, is built
yeah,
around identity and
yeah,
telling you what your identity is, and telling
yeah.
you that your identity is all these different
Mm,
immutable characteristics or things about
right.
you, like your sex, or your race, or your size, or and some of
Mm,
those, if you stay locked into those as your identity, they could have really negative
yeah,
outcomes for you, because now they've pulled mental health issues in as a category of social justice. It's like if you have depression or anxiety, you're
yeah,
or if you have, and so people get locked into these, and being obese,
yeah.
that's part of my identity, fat positivity, right? Like I can't
Right.
lose any weight.
Yeah.
That's a negative thing to lock yourself into, is who you
Mm,
are. And I love that you said that, because I've been we could talk forever offline, but I've been through that, of figuring out who I am,
yeah.
and at the end of the day, it's like, I know I am a child of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Um, you are welcome back on Deprogrammed anytime. Will
Oh,
you
I was gonna say, I would love to. I was looking forward to this conversation so much, because I was just saying it would be great to be able to come back, and to like, I don't know how you you do community. I would love to just connect more with people who you feel would resonate, and just, yeah, do more virtual life together, because it can feel, I feel like we need each other, and as a means to navigate this, because there can be a lot of cognitive dissonance as you're kind of coming out of a certain way of viewing the world, and it's just helpful to have other people who've kind of been on that journey and are kind of supporting each other through it.
So I'm gonna have you back, if you would come back. On my live shows, we usually talk about kind of what's in the news, but we don't constrain ourselves to what's
Mhm.
topical. And
Yeah,
sometimes I just have one guest co-host, but other times I love to introduce people. So
yeah.
I'm pressuring you by asking you on camera. No, I'm gonna reach out to
Yes.
you. I'll let you know when I have a guest who I think you might really enjoy, and
Yeah.
we can have a conversation together. And Dr. Joel Brown, will you tell people where they can find you online?
Yeah, I mean, main place at the moment is Twitter, really. So just come and see me at Twitter at Joel Brown MD. I'm sure it'll be in the
We'll
link in
put
the.
it below.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, come reach out to me. Obviously, it'd be great to have to follow me. But honestly, if you want to send me an inbox message, I do try my best. I'm very much saturated with a lot, so it's slow, but I will try to get back to you. But if you mention me, I will most certainly, again, try to get back to you. I really look forward to engaging. Any questions based on anything I've said here, please send it my way.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, your insight, all of it. Thanks for just being you and doing what you're doing online.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you to today's sponsor, the Church on the Square of Georgetown, Texas, which happens to be my church. My church is no longer allowed to advertise on Facebook, which is unfortunate because that's how I and a lot of other church members originally found them. They've been told that they violate community standards. There's no details there of what that means, but you guys know the score. Anyway, since they're not allowed to advertise, I'm here to give them a plug. You can find them online at thechurchonthesquare.org. You can also find videos of all the sermons and some other kinds of content on their YouTube page at Church on the Square. You can also join us. If you happen to be in the Georgetown, Texas area, we meet every Sunday at Ken's Guitars, that's Kenz, Ken's Guitars, right on the Georgetown Square. We meet outside, right on the square. Sometimes, if the weather's nice, you might find us there. You might find us outside in front of Ken's. But if you're local, I hope to see you. Thank you.